Hi, this is part 3 of a 3-part video on death. And we're going to be talking about what death is and what death is not in this number 3 video. Now I'm just going to recap what we've covered in the past 2 videos. Just summarize, give you a brief summary. So, we are spiritual beings experiencing human life. We're here on earth to expiate, advance, and restore our soul, bringing it back into equilibrium. In rebelling against our destiny and entering the processes on earth, committing spiritual mistakes, we incurred karma. Our benevolent and loving Father gave us the grace of reincarnation to enable us to expiate, advance, and restore our soul and bring it into equilibrium. Death facilitates reincarnation so that the journey back to our Father and our true destiny is less arduous, less difficult. For some of us, the journey will be longer than for others, but each of us will eventually bring our soul back into equilibrium. It is not a matter of if, but one of when. Most of us enter the earthly plane in a given lifetime in a veil of darkness. Blackout period, some people say. Ignorant of who we are, of our past lifetimes, and the fact that we chose to return at that time or this time to honor the soul contract that we decided on while we were in the spiritual plane, and we decided on that journey with the advice and counsel of our guides and the others from the higher hierarchies. Although we are created equal as spirits, we are not born equal as men due to our different karmic journey. And equal here doesn't mean that I am better than you or you're better than I am. It just simply means we've had different experiences. We have different likes and dislikes, different talents. As such, each of us is born with different talents, as I just said, strengths and weaknesses. Death usually occurs at the end of each soul contract, and we return to the spiritual plane. Now, in the first video of this 3-part video, we looked at certain facts with death, before death, during death, and after death. So I'm going to recap here. Some premature deaths are not really accidents, but are part of the karmic journey, as in some cases of sudden infant syndrome. Some cases. Now remember, I didn't say all cases of SID, sudden infant syndrome. Sudden infant death syndrome, I said in some cases. Witchcraft can also cause premature death. And that would not be a part of our karmic journey. For most of us, when we enter the earthly plane in any given lifetime, the time of our death is preordained. For some, there's a choice. And you might have 4 or 5 departure gates or departure points, some people will say. However, that choice of departure gate is not infinite, for there is indeed a final departure gate when the soul must extricate itself from the host body and return to the spiritual plane. Traveling, a process that we go through when death is natural. During this process, we often examine our actions and experiences during our current lifetime, while the body begins to shut down as we prepare to exit our current lifetime. It is during this time that we often try to make amends for incorrect actions and words towards others. For some, it is a time to forgive and to ask for forgiveness, to right wrongs, so to speak. Death is the final stop for the traveler. At this time, the metaphorical cord is cut and the soul extricates itself from the host body and re-enters the spiritual plane. Some of us linger before fully crossing over into the light for several reasons, including destructive guilt, penchant for mischief, and the shock of sudden, accidental death. Guilt, forgiveness, humility, and judgment and love are important in facilitating the crossing over into the light. We must forsake judgment and destructive guilt and embrace forgiveness, humility, and redemptive guilt and love. Humility allows us to ask for forgiveness and to unconditionally forgive and love self and others. Redemptive guilt will propel us towards forgiveness of self, strengthened with corrective actions. Forgiveness has to be accompanied with corrective actions. If not, it's only that. Words. Forgive me, but you do nothing to correct the incorrect action. Forgiveness liberates and energizes us. It gives us the wings, or gives the soul the wings to be fly and be free. Our guides, some of whom have been with us throughout our different lifetimes, are always present to guide us and gives us their wise counsel. As spirits endowed with free will and a conscience to guide, we can heed or not heed their wise counsel. We will decide our next karmic journey, and we will decide that with our guides and the collective in general, those spirits of higher hierarchies, and with the people with whom we are going to interact. Death, when viewed through the eyes of the soul, is neither the end of our true existence nor the beginning of a journey to the punishment of eternal damnation, nor the reward of eternal life with a resurrected body in a breezy garden with milk and honey. Rather, death is a facilitator for reincarnation, which is the vehicle that our benevolent Father has provided to enable us to expiate, advance, and restore our soul. It makes the journey back to Christhood, and back to Christhood, I just use that word for perfection, so to speak, without any, more affinity to one religion or another, because I'm not religious in that sense, but I just use Christhood as that when we have restored our soul completely and our path less or arduous. Death enables the transition from our temporary existence in the physical plane back to the permanent, eternal, spiritual plane, that from which we came. This knowledge teaches us the knowledge that death is the facilitator for reincarnation, and that reincarnation is the vehicle that our Father, Divine Consciousness, our Mother, by whatever name, it doesn't matter, the Creator, or that something that is greater than us, gave us when we rebelled and got ourselves into problems. And so karma came into play, the law of cause and effect. And so we have to expiate, cleanse, purify, correct the incorrect actions, advance and restore our souls. Okay, so that's what death enables, the transition from one lifetime to another. So birth, death, rebirth. Now, once we have this knowledge, it teaches us not to fear death, and it helps us to cope when our loved ones die. Indeed, this knowledge of what death is through the eyes of the soul, it gives us agency and empowers us to live our lives in the earthly plane to the fullest and not live in paralysis, preparing and waiting to die. Now, what death is and what death is not, through the eyes of the soul, incorporates most of the defining aspects of the views, the different views and beliefs about death and the afterlife of most of the religious systems and cultures from around the world, and the different perspectives, from the legal, medical, philosophical, even poetic and psychological perspectives. Now, they're summarized as this, and I think I got about 41 of them, 41 of what death is and what death is not. I think I do believe it is 41. Yes, 41. So, let's run through them. Now, what death is and what death is not. Death is accidental because we were not meant to be a part of the processes on earth, but strayed from our path. And most origin of death stories are usually accidental, right? Death is always happening. From the moment we come into this earthly existence, death is happening. Cells in our bodies are constantly dying on the microscopic level. External surfaces of the skin die as they're being renewed. As you shed. And that's dust, your house dust. It's part of what you're shedding. Like your skin, for example, it's shedding. External surfaces of the skin die as they're being renewed from below. As we age, this renewal slows down. Red blood cells live for 2 to 3 months and are constantly being manufactured in the bone marrow. In this cycle of nature, death and renewal on both the microscopic and macroscopic level, right? So on the macroscopic level, we die we're reborn. And then we die and reborn, right? So that's what the cells do. The liver and the spleen remove the dead cells, right? The dead blood cells. Now, it's the red blood cells now. Death is an awakening, for it takes us back to the spirit world, where we once again become fully cognizant of the history of all our past lives and the history of the journey of the soul. Death is a beginning of another incarnation and another learning experience. Death is an awakening, as I said in number 3, that's like Buddhism. Death is a conclusion to each volume of our many volumes story. Now, each lifetime, I liken it to a volume because our story as a spirit, as a soul, each soul has many karmic journeys, and each karmic journey is indeed a volume in that multi-volume story that is the history of the soul. Death is a continuum because we continue to learn as we move into the light and up the ladder, up the different rungs of the ladder after each lifetime in the earthly plane. Death is deliverance from our spiritual mistakes and the wrong path on which we find ourselves. It is deliverance because it enables us to find our way back to the Father and back to our original destiny. Death is destruction of the physical body as the metaphorical cord is cut, thus enabling the soul to fly away. Death is empowerment, for it enables us to expiate, advance, and restore our souls so that we can return to our true essence, the state of Christhood, back to the Father, back to our true destiny. Death is an ending of one incarnation, lifetime, and learning experience. Death is the equalizer, for it does not discriminate. Everyone must die, regard of class, race, nationality, gender, and all the other labels and masks that we collectively use to hate, to separate and segregate, and incur karmic debt. Death is everything, for without it, to facilitate reincarnation, how would we find our way back to the Father? Death is grace from our Father to we, his errant children, so that we can find our way back home. Death is a facilitator, for it facilitates the truth of reincarnation, the truth that is reincarnation, the consequence of karma, enabling the soul to expiate, advance, and restore itself. Death is impartial because it does not choose between us versus them. Everyone who comes into this earthly existence, this earthly plane, must die. There are no exceptions to the rule. death is inevitable, for our host body was not made to live forever. It is infinite. It follows natural laws, and there are no exceptions to those laws. Death is a liberator, for it liberates the spirit from the body and will eventually, through reincarnation, enable us to expiate, advance, and restore our souls. Death liberates the soul of its corruption so that the soul can achieve equilibrium and the state of Christhood. It liberates us from our prison of matter and the five senses. Death is a moment in time as the spirit cuts the last cord, that metaphorical cord that binds it to its host, the body. It is at this moment that we die. And at that moment, no matter how violent it is, we feel no pain. Death is natural, for it is one of the natural laws of the earth, and we can extend that and say perhaps of the universe, or this universe perhaps. Stars die as well. All things must die at some point. Nothing lives forever. Death is non-existence of the host body. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Death is non-sentient, for sentience is of the physical domain, the ability to feel, right? That is of the physical domain, part of our prison bars. Death is nothing, for the mortal body becomes nothing and is devoid of all senses, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Death is a passage back to the spiritual plane or realm. Death is perpetual development for the expiation, advancement, and restoration of the soul, or we could sometimes say ear of the soul, EAR of the soul, is ongoing. It's always ongoing. And even after Christhood is attained, the soul will continue on its path. Death is privation. And privation is when you're denied, when you don't have, the necessary, like food and water. When you're denied those things, they're not available to you. So death is privation, for the body no longer demands food or wants drink and other necessities to sustain it. Death is progressive enfeeblement, for the body progressively declines, goes down, as it approaches its final departure gate, as the body declines when you're traveling. And progressive enfeeblement was what they believed in, I believe it was Mesopotamia. That was one belief, that you die and then, in the afterlife, it just progressively declines spirit, right? Death is a process, as the spirit often begins to extricate itself from the body, months, weeks, or days earlier. We sometimes see and experience that slow march to death, when we begin to do things that, in hindsight, may only be interpreted as such. For example, we visit favorite places we have not been to in a long while. Call friends and family and tell them we love them. Put things such as wills in order. Consciously, we might not realize why we are suddenly doing these things, but the Spirit obviously knows that the hour is at hand. During this process, the Spirit does much traveling, going in and out of consciousness, much sleep as it prepares and is being prepared by other spirits, including its guides and angels. From the moment we are born, we begin to die on both the microscopic and macroscopic levels, as I discussed previously about the red blood cells, for example. Death is purposeful, as is life. Death is not random, even though it has a set time for some and a more flexible one for others. For spiritual beings experiencing human life, its purpose is to facilitate reincarnation so that we can bring our souls back into equilibrium. And it's that fact that makes life also purposeful, because we're here for a purpose. It helps, death helps to make the journey on our true path back to the Father less arduous. Death is redemption, for it enables us by facilitating the truth that is reincarnation to bring the soul back into equilibrium so that we can return to the Father. Death is a release, for it releases us from the prison of our senses and the cares of this world in the short term. In the long term, death will release us from the arduous journey of the expiation, advancement, and restoration of the soul, the EAR of the soul, when we reach Christhood. Death is resurrection, for it facilitates reincarnation when we return to the earthly plane with a different host, a different body for our soul. Death is salvation, for it facilitates the EAR, expiation, advancement, and restoration of the soul through different lifetimes until it is brought back into equilibrium. The state of Christhood, when we realize and know fully the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of who, why, and what we are. Death separates us from the host body and other spiritual beings experiencing human life. Death is sure. Once the spirit enters a mortal body, mortal host, it is not a sure thing that a baby will be born after conception. But once that baby is born, the spirit decides to associate itself with the host body, decides to come into this earthly existence. It is a certainty that it must die. For some of us, as we said before, how we die is not predetermined. It is not exact. For others, it is predetermined, as is illustrated in the popular story that I told in the first video of death visiting the house of the man who was next on the list. And the man was very hospitable to death. And while death was enjoying what he was being fed, the man went and he moved his name from the person who was going to die next. He moved it to the bottom of the list, and death, being grateful for this, for the hospitality he was shown, decided to give the man a break. And so he said he was going to move his name from the next one on the list and put it to the bottom. But by then, we know what the man did. So indeed, he was the next one who did die. Now, when the volume of our many volume story has been read, it closes. That's death. That's another way to look at death. Our time is up. There's also an old Irish saying which encapsulates this fact, that when it's time for you to go, you're going to go, and how you're going to go is, for a lot of people, that's how they're going to go. It says, the old Irish saying, that if you're to die by hanging, you can never die by drowning. Once again, the soul's journey is a many-volume story. Death is the conclusion of each volume. Death is sure. Death is temporary, as is the human life we experience. Death does not last forever. The death of the human body is permanent, but the spirit cannot die. And so death is temporary because the spirit will eventually inhabit a new host. Death is permanent for the mortal body, but it is temporary for the soul or the spirit. Death is transformation, for the spirit goes from one lifetime to another until the final reincarnation, when the EAR of the soul is attained and we are transformed. Death is transition because it facilitates reincarnation, enabling us to transition from the earthly plane to the spiritual plane. Through death, our soul can transition and transcend to a higher level. According to Kastenbaum, the psychologist, death comes and goes, winding in and out of life. And this is what he calls the cycling and recycling of life. Death unites us with our essence, the spirit world, and loved ones who have passed on. In death, we are united, as it does not distinguish between rich and poor, oppressor and oppressed. Death is for everyone. Death is universal, for all things must eventually die. That is nature. All of us, spiritual beings experiencing human life, and I must say, eternal spiritual beings experiencing temporary human life, must die. No matter our social economic rank, creed, sex, gender, race, and the list goes on, nothing and no one is exempt from death. Death is a time for waiting until the next reincarnation and our return to the earthly plane. Death is a welcome breather, for the journey towards the EAR of our soul is an arduous one. It's a difficult one. It's a hard road to travel and a mighty long way to go. It is too arduous for us to do the EAR of our soul in one lifetime. The human body could never endure, and I go into details in this in some of my books. This is because as human beings, we are prisoners of our senses of sight, smell, hearing, taste, and feelings. Death divides the arduousness of our journey. And by dividing the journey into shorter ones, shorter, more bearable parts, death leads us to a period of respite when we will have time to reflect upon our most recent lifetime, learn, and decide upon the next one in our soul's journey. Death is all of these things that I've just stated and more. It must not be feared, for it is grace that comes through a loving Father to guide his errant, prodigal children back to their right path. Death is not a fixed state because the soul detaches itself from the body. Not even the body is in a fixed state because it decomposes and continues on its journey. Death is not a catastrophe, for it brings relief and respite for what is often an arduous journey as we expiate, advance, and restore our soul. Death, once again, is not punishment, for it is the grace given to errant children by a loving Father who does not judge us. While death is final for the physical body, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it is not final for the soul. Once again, because the soul is eternal, know that we are only tenants on this earth. Let us be good tenants. Live each day. Forgive and love unconditionally ourselves and our brother. Live each day as if it were our last day on earth. Remember that we will see each other in the light once more. When we enter the final departure gate, it is the end of one more arduous journey in the expiation, advancement, and restoration of our soul. One step closer to where we're going. Right, to destination. After that arduous journey, death, once again, more details, I should say, are in my book. Okay, I go into a lot more details. And I will end here by saying, as usual, we are all tenants on this earth, not here to have dominion or to rule over anything or anyone. We are not here to have dominion over the fowl of the air, the fish in the sea, or the beasts in the fields. We are not here to rule and have supremacy over our brothers. Let us be good tenants. Let us take care of ourselves and each other. Let us trod ever so lightly and take care of this planet we call Earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. Remember that there is something that is greater than us. That is the fatherhood of God. We respect and we show our love for that something that is greater than us. And that is the brotherhood of man. Taking care of ourselves, of the planet, and of each other. So, the brotherhood of man, the fatherhood of God, and the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have others, and my guide say, them do unto us. Love. That which I do unto my brother, I what? I do unto myself, for I am my brother's keeper. One divine, universal love.